Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, Mangotology. I'm here with my husband Jeff, and today we're going to be doing a legal analysis about the Church of Scientology, discussing their legal situations they're in. Since Jeff's an attorney, we wanted to kind of weigh in on Scientology and the different legal ramifications of things that are involving the Church of Scientology. So basically one of the things that I get asked on my channel a lot is about refunds. And a lot of people say, why don't you get a refund from the Church of Scientology? Your husband's an attorney. Why don't you go after the Church of Scientology to try to get some of your money back? And my understanding has always been that it's harder to be able to get a refund from a church because they're claiming it as a donation. And it's harder to be able to basically take Scientology to court, but I wanted to ask you what you think about the Scientology refund process from a legal perspective.
It's very complicated is the short answer, and I know that's not very satisfying to people that want a clear-cut yes or no answer, but like many things in the law, it's vague. On the one hand, when you make a donation to an organization that is a non-profit, which the IRS has deemed Scientology to be a religion, and I can explain why, the thinking behind that anyway. It's pretty hard to get that money back. You've already made the donation. Where it becomes more complicated is when you allege that there's fraud and misrepresentation. For example, they told me they needed my $1 million to build the superpower whatever building. And it becomes clear that the superpower building was budgeted at $100 million, but they raised $200 million. So they didn't really need the money for the superpower building. And instead it's going to run gold base where they keep people locked up. You make the argument that they defrauded you. Fraud is, they told you something, that something wasn't true, you relied on what they told you, and you suffered damage. So the fourth prong is a little difficult because you were out that $1 million anyway, whether they put it to gold base or they put it to the superpower building. And once you donate money, they have the right to determine where to best use that donation so that it helps the most people, and there would be their argument. It's more difficult where you have money on account at the Church of Scientology,
Right.
Or you've made a donation and you then request a refund. There's a lawsuit going on right now that is, it sort of gives you the catch-22 of how Scientology operates. They have something called a claims verification board. And that board decides refunds typically through an arbitration. If you ask for your money back, though, you're deemed a suppressive person. But in order to get your money, you have to fill out a form in person. But if you are declared a suppressive person, then you're not allowed in the building. So it's kind of Kafkaesque in the sense that you wake up and you're in court and you don't know why. That's the analogy. You can't get the money back without filling out the form. You can't fill out the form without going into the church. The church won't let you in the church, so you can't fill out the form. So that's how that goes round and round. The arbitration is kind of interesting because typically in an arbitration you get the person wanting money gets to pick one arbiter, the person who they're suing gets to pick another arbiter, and those two pick a third to be the neutral. Some other situations you just have one arbiter who decides everything. But in this instance, now you have arbiters that have to come from the Church of Scientology, and by asking for a refund, you've been deemed a suppressive person, so the person judging your case already knows that you've been deemed a suppressive person, otherwise you wouldn't be there asking for your money back. So it's kind of like the equivalent of having the judge decide whether you should be around small children knowing that you're a convicted child molester. There's just no way it's ever going to happen. And so it becomes a futile exercise to try to get your money back through the arbitration process or the claims verification board.
Wait, let's go back a little bit, because kind of what you were discussing right now is about Luis Garcia, because if you guys obviously are familiar, Luis Garcia had a big case that's been going on for a very long amount of time. He donated money for, like, say, the cross from the Superpower building. They raised money for that cross from so many different people saying, well, you're going to buy the cross up on the Superpower building, for example. And there were, like, fraudulent representations there, and that's why he was going through this arbitration process, because when you sign Scientology forms, you know, when you first initially sign up for services, you say that you're only going to, you know, subject yourself to this internal arbitration process through Scientology. But the different things, kind of like we were talking about with having money on account and stuff like that, from my understanding from being in different religions as a kid or as an adult, whatever, when you give a donation, it'd be a donation just, you know, towards the general church for whatever that they'll, you know, use the money or funds for. Scientology, they call it a donation, but really it's a set fixed price for a course. Like, yes, you can say donate money to the International Association of Scientologists. Now, in that case, it's a set amount of money for a course. Does that make it any different? And especially also with the money that I put on account, if that's considered a savings account that I'd have access to, you know, that's an advanced donation, I guess they're considering it. But what happens when it's like for a course? You know, it's a set donation.
Well,
price.
First of all, I wasn't talking about any specific case.
Right.
Just so we're clear on that. With regard to that fixed price for a course, you probably signed something that said you get no refunds. You probably signed something that said if you want your money back, you have to fill out a routing form or go through arbitration. So you're kind of hamstrung that way. Until a court finds that the arbitration process is slanted and stacked against the person making the claim, which is hard to do for reasons we can talk about, this isn't going to change. There is a similar situation, not as egregious obviously, but in the early 90s, the late 80s, Kaiser, it's a health system that's famous out here in California, I don't know the rest of the country. It's an HMO, and you go to Kaiser and you see their doctors, and if you have a medical malpractice claim or something like that, you had to sue them in arbitration. And there was, people contended that the arbitration system was slanted because it took 2 or 3 years to get a date, and then there were onerous requirements that you had to go through, and the Supreme Court of California stepped in and said you got to reform your arbitration system so that now if you can't afford it, Kaiser pays for the arbiter to decide the case, and the arbitration is administered not through Kaiser but by the Office of Independent Administrator. And the reason I know this is because I've been a Kaiser arbiter, meaning I've ruled on cases of medical malpractice that's come before them. And you have to, mostly it's retired judges or lawyers that have a certain background, training, and experience, and the whole system is now independently administered by an outside organization, the Office of Independent Administrator, that is not controlled by Kaiser. So the wait times to get a hearing have been dramatically cut. I think people feel it's fairer and that they're getting their day in court rather than they feel that the deck is stacked against them.
So then why is it so hard then for the government then to step in regard to like the arbitration process or into other sort of things when people are alleged being held against their will, such as I was, along with many other different things that you would think that if it was any other business or group that, you know, we would have some form of legal protection or government would be able to step in and take control. I know that they are a tax-exempt organization, but why, if there's a lot of crime and especially financial misconduct, as long with all the other stuff we know and hear about, why is it so hard then for government to do anything about this, or the arbitration, any of that?
Well, the reason is that the government doesn't want to get involved in the business of determining whether a particular religion is valid or invalid, because once you go down that road, I'm going to give you an example. All right, we all think it's nutty that DC-8s were dispatched from Grand Lord Xenu, and they flew here from wherever the hell it was, Target 2, until they got to the volcanoes of Hawaii, and then they dropped the aliens in there, and then they got vaporized in there, and their corpses attached themselves to people and all this other nonsense, okay, right? Mm-hmm. So that's crazy. However, one could make an argument that a lady who's a virgin that gets pregnant, and then there's a star that guides them to a specific little
right,
town.
That can seem just as weird.
Right. So the government is not here to say, your religion is crazy, your religion isn't. And so religions get a certain amount of leeway, even though you and I may think that there's nothing to it. Now, what about criminal activity? The government has said you cannot hide behind your religion in order to engage in a criminal conspiracy or crime. For example, Warren Jeffs, he's the leader of some offshoot polygamist, purportedly right, Mormon cult, and they believe that they're allowed to have 12 wives, all around the age of, well, like people like Roy Moore's dating 14-year-olds, and the government says, you know what, claiming that that's your religion, that's not going to pass muster. There is some case about a certain tribe of Indians using peyote, and I don't remember what the ultimate outcome was, but if it's not harming someone else and it's sort of neutral in its effect, it's okay. But if it's the archdiocese, deep sixing files, engaging in a conspiracy to transfer priests to other dioceses, that's not cool. That's not within your First Amendment protection.
There's so many different topics and things that we can talk about involving Scientology and the legal aspects. So if you guys have specific questions, you can write them to me, and Jeff and I can sit down and do more of these type of videos if you guys are interested. So basically the question that a lot of people have been asking lately, just because it's been in the news, is regarding Donald Trump and how there has been some different government officials who have spoken to Leah Remini privately, and others who are saying that Donald Trump, at least within his presidency, wants to somehow work to take down the IRS tax exemption. But what could he possibly do? Is there any sort of thing that he'd be able to do to...
Nothing, unless he wants to be impeached. What he may not understand, I don't know if that's true or not, if he expressed that interest or not, and I don't know who the government official was. It was purportedly some assistant to an assistant who may work in the White House. I don't know. But a president who uses the IRS or the CIA or the FBI to target another person, individual, or group based on his or her displeasure with that group is engaging in obstruction of justice, which is an impeachable offense. Nixon tried to do that. Nixon used the IRS to go after his enemies, and he wanted the FBI to investigate certain things, and so that goes nowhere fast.
And the last question that I was just thinking about is how, especially at the end of someone's show like Leah Remini's, was what if people wanted to gather together to have like a class action lawsuit? I think it was the prior season of this one, and how like they were like meeting secretly with like these attorneys and this sort of stuff, that there may be some possibility of people being able to recoup their money. Is kind of like what we talked about. Is that not going to be some form of a possibility just because of government protection of their religious status, that it's not going to be something that's going to be an easy feat for them to undertake?
Class actions are not my area of expertise, but I do know that in order to have a class action, there has to be a unity of interest. And so it would be very difficult for one person to say, I was raped at the ranch, another person to say I was engaged in slave labor at the cadet org, another person who says I was cheated out of $50,000, another person who says they were defrauded for a cross on the building.
So
those are very different claims,
areas, right?
and so the court probably wouldn't grant class action status to everyone that had a grievance with Scientology. Then you have to get into whether the court's going to become involved in the internal disputes between a religion and its purported disaffected
Right, but
members.
what happens if someone was raped by a Sea Org official? Would they be able to go after that Sea Org official themselves without necessarily going through a Scientology arbitration process, or they, as a religious worker, somehow get some form of protection under the Scientology umbrella?
I think if someone was raped, first of all, it would be preferable to have a criminal case. Once the criminal case is done, then you can use the evidence of that in your civil case, which has a lower burden of proof. And so probably an individual who raped someone, you could sue that individual. But would you be successful in suing the Church of Scientology as part of that? It seems kind of doubtful. It's unlikely that a court would find the church engaged in a conspiracy, which is an agreement with some person to rape the plaintiff or the victim. And so she or he could sue the perpetrator, the person that raped them. But how much are you going to get on these people? They get $50 a week and they're eating rice and beans.
Right, yeah, so you're not really going to get too far with that sort of case. So basically, overall right now, there's kind of, a gloomy sort of possibility of being able to really serve justice on Scientology, unless I think more people continue to speak out, raise awareness of, how they're abusing their tax exemption. Eventually, at some point in time, there can be more justice served, on these sort of people.
Well, the IRS might revisit their tax-exempt status, but it can't be because the president directed them to do so. Right. The Attorney General, it would have to be within the Justice Department, and that's how it could occur. Gloomy in terms of legal issues, it's kind of yes and no, but certainly it's going to collapse on itself because there's fewer and fewer people supporting this house of cards.
Right, and that could survive in the internet age and people doing what we're doing, speaking out on camera. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have questions for Jeff and for me to answer, we'll make this a little series if you guys enjoy videos such as this. Also, I want to let you guys know that there is a sale on suppressive merchandise. If you go to suppressivemerchandise.com and use this code right over here, I'll put it in the video, you'll get 20% off your order. Get yourself a Suppressive Person t-shirt. Also, if you like videos such as this, you can make a donation to my channel. You can go to patreon.com/StephenMango for more information on how you can do so. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we will be back with another video for you soon.